Okay, gandang araw sa ating lahat. Tuloy-tuloy na natin po tapusin natin ang ating personal identification techniques subject. Our supplemental discussion is for lesson 17. Yung last lesson po natin to sa ating fingerprint subject. Our topic is fingerprint system, examination, identification, and presentation of evidence in court. Although tapos na natin yung fingerprint system natin, examination, identification, itong presentation of evidence tayo mag-focus. So these are the learning objectives. Familiarize the fingerprint system, examination and identification, and identify the procedure preparing evidence chart for presentation of evidence in court. Ayos. Fingerprint system. The 10 fingerprint system. The basic material is the 10 fingerprints of the suspect whose purpose is to confirm his identity and criminal history. Meron meron tayong sampung daliri sa kamay at sa paa. Nawala yung isa. Okay. Single fingerprint system, whose basic material is the fingerprint collected from the suspect individually. Yun ang tawag natin sa single fingerprint system. Fingerprint collected from the suspect individually. Preparing fingerprint chart for court presentation. It is not only necessary that the fingerprint expert's testimony is capable and able to put up a good line of argument in favor of the fingerprint. Method of identification should be uh, called to testify on the witness's stand the substan and to substantiate his opinion or argument. Tama nga naman. Meron kasi sa rules of court, sa rules of court, criminal procedure. Meron tayong tinatawag na expert opinion rule, which is an exemption to the hearsay rule, kung di ako nagkakamali. Wherein, etong sa expert opinion rule, pag ang isang expert, example, doctor, scientist, criminologist, fire examiner, fingerprint examiner, etc. Once na nagsalita po sila, ang tawag natin sa testimony na ibibigay nila as a witness is expert opinion, which is admissible in the court of law. Ngayon, hindi yun basta-basta na papaniwalaan ng judge din naman kung wala silang basehan or wala silang examination, scientific method, or experiment, or processing sa laboratory na ginawa at saka present sa korte. Kaya mag-present din sila sa korte ng method of identification na ginawa nila. For example, sa fingerprint, na magpapatunay na correct ang kanilang sinasabi. Na correct yung sinasabi nila. And of course, na magpapatunay din na nagmamatch yung resulta ng processing or examination na kinandak nila doon sa testimonya nila. Okay? Photograph or enlarge the fingerprint card standard, and the same true with the limited and developed latent print at the crime scene or physical evidence recovered, which is 8 inches by 10 inches. So, if photograph nila yung fingerprint card, itong fingerprint card, 8 by 10 inches yan. Kailangan naka-enlarge 8 by 10 inches. Para sa ganun, makikita yan agad-agad. Yan yung basis. Yan yung isa. Yan kasi yung i-represent nila sa korte. Any discrepancy made in the making ridge characteristics on the original or small can cause dismissal. Can cause the admissibility of the evidence. Siyempre, pag sinabi natin inadmissible, hindi siya pwedeng gamitin as evidence. The print will be enhanced in the enlargement. The print will be enhanced in the enlargement. Yung, alam nyo kasi guys, yung mga fingerprint ngayon, sa pag-represent nila, pinipicture na lang nila yan para ma-enlarge. Para sa ganun, uh, ma-prove talaga nila correct. Alam nyo ba kasi guys, usually, hindi naman sa dinami-dami ng kaso, nagagamit ang fingerprint. Usually guys, ginagamit lang naman ang fingerprint para malaman kung yung suspect na or yung accused na hinuli nila, siya yung patay talaga o hindi. Lalo na kasi pag yung kaso ay suspected, hindi sila sigurado doon sa suspect na pumatay kasi walang nakakita. Pero meron siyang iniwang trace which is yung fingerprint niya na nakikita sa crime scene at yun yung gagamitin laban sa kanya. So that is the time where represent na yung mga expert sa fingerprint, yung mga fingerprint expert sa korte, pipicturean nila yung fingerprint from the fingerprint card or from the crime scene and then sa kanilang and then yung fingerprint from the specimen, I mean from the suspect or the accused para ma-match nila yun kung magkatugma. Okay? And then pipicturean nila yun, naka-enlarge. Yun yung i-represent nila sa korte. Doon natin makikita kung meron siyang discrepancy or wala, kung magkaparehas ba sila o hindi. Okay? That will sum up the story. Avoid crossing of any lines to avoid confusion when trying to follow up the different they are points they are supposed to indicate, especially when a stranger of fingerprint identification is making the comparison. Okay? Preparing a chart. Use cardboard which is 1/32 inches, yung size 1/32. Di ba meron tayong 1/4, 1 whole, 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, yung mga cardboard. Maliit na yung 1/32. Enlarge the corresponding known prints of the suspect from the fingerprint card 8 by 10 inches. I-enlarge natin nalagay sa cardboard na 1/32. When enlarging a photograph, leave at least 2 inches of margin in the sides for labeling the points of similarities. Meron siya at least 2 inches na margin para doon natin susulat yung mga similarities, yung uh, mga points of similarities doon sa fingerprint. Dahil wala tayong makita dito sa internet. Naka, example ng pagpapresent nila. Imagine na lang natin na suggested procedures, draw an oval with a pencil. Oval, pa-circle. Hindi oval, pa-circle yan. Hindi oblong. Okay? Draw an oval with a pencil around the print having at least 1 inch margin. Laging may 1 inch margin para pwedeng pagsalatan ka. The point of the oval should be nearly equidistant from the margin of the point as possible. Mark with pencil and extend to touch the line forming the overall around the print. Number each characteristics consecutively in a clockwise direction around the print. And the two mark prints, the Latin and the standard. Pag yung sinabi natin guys na Latin, yung Latin yun yung nakita natin sa crime scene at yung standard, yan yung mismong kinuha natin na fingerprint from the accused or the suspect. Okay? The two mark prints, Latin and standard, and the table of explanation should be mounted on a large sheet of paper or chart to be in the best and most available form of an explanation. And points of similarities are enough to secure a conviction. But if the situation warrants, identify as many as you can. Yun. Let's try. Mag-example tayo. Magbigay ako ng example, guys. Okay, mag-example tayo. Ano yung ibig sabihin niyan kasi? For example, yung dito tayo sa thumb, both right thumb, ay ganito na lang. Okay, simplify ko guys ha. For example, ito yung ating latent print at ito yung standard print. Okay? Etong si latent print, parehas silang, ito, from the right, etong latent print is, kwan siya, isa siyang ulnar loop, I mean radial loop. Nahanapan siya dun sa ating, nahanap natin siya dun sa crime scene, isa siyang radial loop kasi according to the examiner, this is from the right hand, thumb. Okay? At saka yung recurving ridge niya is towards the thumb. So, radial loop ang tawag natin siya. Okay. Right thumb. And ito naman yung standard na nanggaling sa ating suspect. Ipagpalagay natin guys, parehas. Na parehas yung parehas lang to. For example lang naman eh. Hindi ko kasi pwedeng gayahin itong dito sa isa. Pagpalagay natin parehas sila. Meron silang similarity na 12 points. Ang gagawin, okay, may island daw dyan. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sa example, maglagay na tayo ng dyan. Dito sa may okay, may margin. Kunwari, may margin pa yan. At least 1 inch. Sabi dito, at least 1 inch daw. Kasi dito nilalagay yung mga points, yung mga similarities. For example, may 12 points of similarities siya. Parehas lang sila dito. Presume lang natin guys na magkaparehas sila. At meron silang mga 12 similarities or qualities na magkaparehas. It is already enough for conviction. Okay? Yun ang kailangan yung maintindihan. So, ganun ang ginagawa nila. Ipagko-compare na yung latent print from the standard print. Again, ulitin ko, yung latent print is nanggaling sa crime scene at yung standard is nanggaling sa suspect or sa accused. Latent fingerprint examination process. The purpose of an examination is to determine or exclude the source of print. Yun ang purpose ng latent fingerprint examination process. Para lang ma-determine at matanggal yung mga prints na hindi connected dun sa crime scene. And of course, matanggal yung mga suspected person na hindi siya relevant or connected sa crime scene. Para sa ganun, ma-acquit sila agad. Kasi what's the purpose naman na patagalin mo siya, i-detain mo siya kung pinapakita naman ng fingerprint niya na hindi siya konektado sa crime scene. The process covers the method used by examiners to determine the print source by looking at and comparing the general ridge flow in the toe fingerprints, the sequences and configurations of the ridge path, and if needed, the sequences and configurations of morphological details of peculiar ridge and nearby ridges. Yung sinabi kanina dito, very important to, itong ridge flow, general ridge flow. Kung yung mga 10 sets of fingerprints nila is magkaparehas, ang ridge flow, for example, yung four fingers niya, yung index to ring, and parehas din dito sa left niya, index to ring is puro loops din sila. Sabihin na natin radial loop sila lahat, radial loop din yan. At saka, pag sinabi kasi natin radial loop dito sa ating right hand, yung recurving ridge niya is towards the thumb. Kung yung recurving ridge niya is towards the thumb, radial loop. Pag towards the left or ulna bone or little finger, it is considered as ulnar loop. Okay? So, magkaparehas ang ridge flow. Ibig sabihin, iisa. May possibility na siya yung perpetrator. Pero hindi nagtatapos yan. Kailangan pag-aralan yung mga characteristics kung may similarities ba siya doon sa ating fingerprint pattern ay latent print na nakita sa crime scene over the standard print na nanggaling sa suspect or sa accused. The philosophies of perception and decision making that all fingerprint examiners need to understand before turning to the mechanics of comparison is paramount in the examination process. Take note of that. Fingerprint identification tayo. Two prints must have the same general pattern in order to give positive identification. Yung pinaka-first. Kasi kahit isang fingerprint pattern lang, ay set of fingerprints lang natin. Example, we have 10. The little, the ring, middle, index, thumb, left thumb, left index, middle, ring, and little. Kung itong little ko, ulnar loop siya. Okay? For example, dun sa crime scene, nakuha lahat yung 10. Kasi nagganon siya sa isang survey. Ewan ko kung anong ginawa niya. Ulnar loop yung left little. Ulnar loop din dun sa left little ng right and left. Tapos, yung fingerprint, nung nag-fingerprint identification sila, yung nakita nilang left little from the exam, dun pa lang sa general characteristics or pattern, hindi na tumutugma agad yung suspect or yung accused, kaya pwede siyang ma-acquit. Okay? There are two main methods that are used for fingerprint identification. But before that, they must also have certain number of common ridge characteristics. Okay, sabi ko kung ilan yung ridge count niya, ano yung tracing niya, yun yung mga positive traits na kailangan nating i-consider. This number can vary depending on how common the characteristics are and how much of the print is available. There are two main methods that are used for fingerprint identification. We have minutiae. Base techniques finds minutiae points and the map their relative placement on the finger to match ridge characteristics. Napag-aralan natin na ang minutiae, yun yung mga fingerprint patterns na makikita natin sa ating mga fingerprint pattern. Yung minutiae, ang example yan is bifurcation, trifurcation, eyelet, dot, short ridge, fragmentary ridge. Okay? Yun yung mga tinatawag nating minutiae. Kung yung placement nun is magkakaparehas dun sa ating standard at sa latent prints, meron siyang positive identification. Pwedeng masabi na may posibilidad na yung suspect at or accused ay iisa at yung perpetrator ay iisa. Also, this method does not take into account the global pattern of ridge and furrows. The correlation-based method is able to overcome some of the difficulties of minutiae-based approach. Correlation-based techniques require the precise location of a registration point and are affected by image translation and rotation. Yung correlation-based, kailangan talaga very accurate sila sa pagko-compare ng placement or positioning ng mga registered points. Example, yung delta and core. Okay? Fingerprint details are described on 3 levels. Level 1 detail includes the general flow and pattern configuration. So, kung papunta ba yung flow niya sa little finger or sa thumb, ibig sabihin sa radial, sa loop, pag yung loop is papunta sa, yung recurving ridge niya is papunta sa thumb, ang tawag natin dun is radial. Pag papunta naman sa little finger or ulnar bone, ulnar loop. Pag sa radial bone or sa thumb, radial. Of course, the details are not sufficient for individualization but can be used for inclusion. They may include information enabling in orientation, core, delta, location, and distinction of finger venous palm versus palm. Level 2 details enable individualization. Yung level 3 naman includes dimensional attributes of ridge such as ridge path, deviation, shape, pores, edge contour, incipient ridge, breaks, creases, scars, and other permanent details. Yun yung sa level 3, fingerprint details. Diba? Napaka-informative. So, ang pinakauna talaga is yung ridge flow o kaya yung pattern. Kailangan, pag sinabi doon na double loop whirl, magpapakita sa right thumb. Double loop whirl lang yon. Ulnar loop. Hindi pwedeng magka-different. Dali lang. Okay, let's proceed to the nature of ridge characteristics for absolute identification. Human skin is elastic and two. Okay, paano tayo? Jump tayo dito, guys. Yung nature and of ridge characteristics kasi kuan na to na tapos na tayo dito. Dito na lang tayo identical points of necessary to admit as fingerprinting evidence in court. But before that, the nature of ridge characteristics for absolute identification. Ano ba yung bakit nasabi na yung nature ng fingerprint is is very absolute for identification? Kasi nga ang fingerprint natin kasi kahit pa mahiwa-hiwa yan, ating friction skin, babalik at babalik pa rin sa dati niya itsura. Unlike sa ating mga dorsal or itong mga ibang part ng skin natin sa katawan, pag kinat mo na yan, ganun na, nakat na yan, meron na siyang scar na may iwan. Unless pabelo mo, pa-surgery mo. Pero yung sa ating mga girls guys, atong friction skin, nakat mo yan, pinaso mo yan using hot water or tinanggal mo yung skin mo dyan sa mga fingers mo, babalik at babalik pa rin yan sa dati niyang itsura. Kasi ganon ka absolute ang identification if you are using fingerprint because of the nature of ridge characteristics. Now let's proceed to identical points necessary to be admitted as fingerprint evidence in court. When there are more than 12 evident points, okay, yung similarities yan, at least may 12 daw na similarities, and the impression is clear, the identification is absolute. When there is between 8 and 12 evident points, identification certainly depends upon clearliness of the type, rarity of the type. Pag 8 and 12 naman yung mga similarities niya, pag clear naman yung yung clearness at rarity of the type, kung mangilan-ngilan lang yung mga ganun na magkaparehas, meron siyang evidentiary. Pwede siyang ma-admit sa korte. Presence of core and delta in the part that is acceptable. Of course, double loop whirl yun. Lagyan mo ba naman ng isang delta lang? Hindi pwede yun. Kailangan dalawang delta. May core ba ang whirl? Meron. May delta ba ang whirl? Meron din. Arch lang at then plain arch at tented arch ang walang core and delta. Always remember that. Basis of fingerprint comparison. Variations in appearances, levels of details in prints, ranges of clarity. Ayan ang basis for fingerprint comparison. Yung variation in appearances. Kung sabi mo double loop whirl, doon sa yung sa right hand niya, right thumb niya may double loop whirl. Yung 'di ba yung sa double loop whirl meron siyang upright and downward position yung loop. Doon sa right thumb niya, yung yung upright position is matatagpuan doon sa second na loop. Pero yung yung nakita nyo na standard is doon pa lang sa unang loop niya is upright na siya at pababa dun sa second loop. Ibig sabihin, magkaiba. Okay? Levels of details in prints. details dun sa print. Kung may mga dots yan, eyelet, tapos dun sa nakita nyo, puro wala, puro bifurcation mga meron, may discrepancy. Ranges of clarity, kung gaano siya ka-clear. Comparing prints. In comparing prints, guys, meron tayong tinatawag kasi dyan na ACE-V methodology. This scientific process of analysis, A is for analysis, C is for comparison, E is for evaluation, and letter V is for verification. Is known as the identification methodology or a structured and systematic manner in which quantitative and qualitative analysis of friction ridges is carried out. Okay? This methodology was introduced by Roy A. Huber, a document examiner in Canada on 1959. In 1980s, the ACE-V or the Analysis, Comparison, Evaluation, and Verification method was adopted by the fingerprint identification community throughout the radiology of David Asco in 1980s. Significance of HV methodology. It gives structure to and guide the examiner through the process, bases identifications upon sound scientific principles, conclusions are objective based on faithful execution of this methodology, not mere observation or intuition. Assures validity and reliability of the conclusions. Consistency and repetition of methodology is assured. Embraces all the factors required by sound scientific practices. Okay? Simplify natin ang HB methodologies. In analysis, the first is letter A, analysis. This is the observation and description stage of the scientific method. Yes. This involves collecting a series of observations to gain an understanding about an observable group of events. In our cases, friction, ridge features, there are appearances and influences that act upon them. This is applied when with the objective of reducing the friction ridge features to their basic components, which involves thorough assessment of properties and attributes of the friction ridge features in unknown latent group impression. So, sa analysis, gumagamit din sila ng reduce the friction ridge features. For example, dun lang sa gitna ng friction ridge, dun sa innermost recurve, sila magpo-focus. Doon sila mag-analyze. Parang gano'n. Assess properties and attributes of friction ridges. Properties and attributes. Sa clarity, tolerable, intolerable. Yan yung mga terms na ginagamit na. Sa size, precise, imprecise, shape, intact, distorted, location, exact, inexact, orientation, evident, inconspicuous, group relations, absolute, or relative. Yan yung mga terms na ginagamit. Ibasa nyo na, nasa module na. This phase also requires qualitative and quantitative assessment of level 1, level 2, and 3 details. Doon sa level 1 details natin sa ridge flow, core, deltas, scars, classifications, and orientation. The general ridge flow in an arch pattern is that the ridges enter on one side of the impression and flow tends to flow out the other side with a rise of wave in the center. Dun sa level 2 naman, ridge path, the ridge characteristics, example, ending ridge, bifurcation, location type, direction, and relationship. Always remember, hindi magkakaparehas ang location. Lalo na pag magkaiba yung fingerprint. Pero kung magkaparehas naman, one person from the standard or from the crime scene, yung latent group, magkaparehas lang yung ridge path niyan. Ibig sabihin, isa yung gumawa. Isa yung may-ari. Friction ridge features generally referred to as the minutiae and points, and their morphology, size, and shape are regarded as level 2 details. And dun sa level 3 detail, we have the ridge attribute, edge shape with edge force, a quid and pores. This consists of pore structure, ridge, periphery, and incipient. Clarity of friction-rich details. The degree of clarity exhibited by the latent print impression determines the level of tolerance that is acceptable to the examiner. Kung clear yung latent print, pwede siyang gamitin, pwede siyang i-dust, i-fingerprint, ay i-lift yung fingerprint na yon kung clear siya. Pero kung hindi naman clear, alam niyo naman may smudges na, huwag niyo nang kunin. Kunin niyo na lang, pero for the purpose of reference lang. Pero mas humanap pa kayo ng mas clear. Ganun yun. Ganun ang pagtingin. Okay? For example dito, letter A is very clear. Itong si B, okay lang. Pero dito sa C, medyo hindi na okay. Siguro masyadong marumi yung fingerprint niya. Okay. Sabi ko kanina, A and B also have a good clarity. Creases lang naman ang meron sa B. Yung white lines, creases. Pero yung sa C, medyo marumi na. Hindi siya, hindi clear. Okay, let's define poor clarity. Note, how friction ridges have become diffuse. There is a lack of distinction between the edges of the ridges and the intervening valleys. The shapes of the incipient ridges have become precisely. Finally, the impression deposition influences such as substrate, surface type, mix residue, direction of touch, and pressure are determined. So, ganun lang. Isisimplify lang natin. Poor quality, basta hindi maganda yung uh, tsura niya. Example ko na sa letter C. Itong substrate naman. Substrate, the surface on which the unknown mark was discovered. Glass paper, polythene bag. Ganyan ang itsura niya. Hindi masyadong clear. Kasi, tawag ito, absorbent kasi uh, yung paper. Sa glass naman, pwede nag-moist yan, kaya ganun ang itsura niya. Comparison of the unknown to the known is done once the fingerprint officer has analyzed the unknown mark and accumulated all the information possible. It is then compared to print or fingerprint form. Sabi ko nga, once na napag-aralan nila yung latent print, i-compare yan dun sa standard print naman galing dun sa suspect or suffix. Guidelines and comparison. Okay, tapos naman na tayo dyan. Ito, Part 1, choose target vision rich features. Kung may makita kayong scar, pwede nyo siyang i-compare kung may scar din yung nakuha nyo from the crime dun sa standard na nanggaling sa suspect or yung creases naman, usually longitudinal length of fingers caused by folding of the skin. Ito yung mga white dyan. Example ng creases yan. Experimentation for level 1 detail. Focus is on but not limited to the print orientation, pattern, ridge flow. Okay. Experimental for level 2, focusing on the shape, location, orientation. Focus is on but not limited to the sweat pores and friction ridges. Yun sa level 3. Okay na yan. Huwag na natin masyado. Comparison of patterns. Okay. Balik tayo dun sa comparison of patterns. Sorry. Ilas na lang natin yun. Firstly, the pattern are compared. The overall fingerprint pattern does not have sufficient uniqueness to determine identification and only functions to narrow the number of possibilities of donors. However, at this stage of the comparison, differences in the pattern type may be sufficient enough to eliminate the unknown mark from the print. Okay? Comparison of ridge characteristics. If the pattern are found to be in agreement, the comparison moves to the next level. The comparisons of the ridge characteristics. The ridge features are examined to ascertain whether they are in the same position, okay, in the same order, and have the same relationship to each other with none in disagreement in both the known prints and unknown marks. This is known as coincident sequence. Coincident sequence. Magkapaparehas lahat ng qualities nila, flow, okay? Kaya hindi lang iisang level, kundi 1, 2, 3 levels yan. Hindi lang sa flow, sa itsura, kundi pati rin sa shape, size, ganun, sa position. If any accountable disagreement is found, the identity cannot be established and the known print will be discounted from the comparison process. Fingerprint expert will also be taking into account the uniqueness features of the ridges themselves, looking for agreement between any visible distinctive ridge, edge shapes, and minute details. So, hahanap tayo ng unique pattern dun sa latent print at hanapin natin siya dun sa standard print kung may magkaparehas pa rin sila. Ito, evaluation. After comparing, mag-evaluate tayo. After comparing the unknown marks and known print, the fingerprint expert will make their evaluation. They will weigh up all the information available as a result of the comparison process and determine whether there is unique agreement between the two to confirm identity beyond all reasonable doubt. And of course, evaluation is made based on the identification philosophy. The identification philosophy can be rephrased by the following statement. Friction ridge identification is established through the agreement of friction ridge formation in sequence, having sufficient uniqueness to establish individuality. Yun yung ilalagay nila kung ma-evaluate na nila na magkaparehas talaga. Verification, parang sa sa drug test, pag nakuha ka na positive ka, dadaan ka pa sa confirmatory test. Okay, marking of prints. When you take the stand as an expert witness, remember that the judge and counsels are not fingerprint expert. Yun ang sasaalang-alang mo. They may know utterly nothing about fingerprinting or at best may have just a smattering knowledge of it. They probably do not know how fingerprint identifications are made or proved. You must be able to explain the whole thing to them in words they can understand and in such a convincing manner that they can accept your testimony and evidence as proof of their identity which you claim exists between two prints. Yun yung mga nilalagay mo sa marking of prints. So, dyan nagtatapos ang ating fingerprint subject. Always remember guys na always use the language na madaling maintindihan ng mga audience pag nag-represent sa korte. Always use the dialect or language that can be understood by your audience, especially dun sa accused at sa ating mga lawyers and judge. And of course, always do consider clarity. Clarity at integrity ng i-represent mong evidence. That would be all. And thank you and God bless. Same procedure, follow the previous instruction for your requirements. Napakadali ng ating instruction doon. Kung meron kayong katanungan, just